So those were the broad strokes of the budget this time around, the Union Budget 2025-26. And to talk about it further with us, we have with us Professor Sachin Chaturvedi, DGRIS for Developing Countries, a well-known economist, and Professor Rakesh Mohan Joshi also joins us. He's Vice Chancellor at the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade. Good evening to you both. First to you, Dr. Chaturvedi, what do you make of the budget in the context of its larger goal of ensuring that India keeps growing and returns to that path of high growth rate that will take it to that goal of being a developed nation by 2047, also keeping in mind that this time around the middle class has been a bit of a beneficiary as far as relief is concerned, and that is expected to boost consumption, boost demand in the economy and help our industries in general.
That's right, Gautam. If you look at the budget today, there are four broad areas which are cross-cutting and have been identified by Finance Minister for priority setting, not for 1 year or two, but for another 20 years that India today has embarked on. And that's why this budget is largely being described as historic and monumental in terms of how we provide impetus in terms of the energy transition, the idea of looking into nuclear option and thinking of smaller plants which are going to transform the energy scenario, particularly for 2030 agenda and also for 2070 net zero commitment. So from that perspective, it's a long-term budget and very specific policy initiatives have been launched. The second and very important dimension is to leverage strength of oceans. And there the idea of blue economy, the idea of focusing on shipbuilding, ship repair and maritime security that has been emphasized. The third, which is a cross-cutting and is present across all the sectors that FM today mentioned, is about science, technology, innovation. You look at agriculture, 4 major missions have been launched. You look at MSME and the large industrial plant revival that in Assam has been proposed. Again, science and technology is playing an important role. The idea of broad-basing development within STI, 10,000 additional scholarships that have been provided with the Prime Minister's research fellows at IIT and at Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. They provide emphasis. And fourth and last is largely in terms of looking into the way external connect of budget is coming in, where all the three areas, the trade, so the export trade mission, the idea of bringing in rationalization in the tariff structure and FDI. So you find a large sum of initiatives, Gautam, that have been launched.
Okay. Professor Joshi, now that there's a broad understanding of the philosophy or guiding principle behind this budget, was there anything in particular that caught your attention that was in the budget?
I think this budget is coming at a time wherever the country and the entire world is in a very, very challenging situation. The people have so far been the big economists. In my age, I have been taught of globalization, reduction of tariffs, and all the trade theories have talked of free trade is good. Free trade prior to World War II was a bad word in Europe. Free trade in America was always a bad word. And now in the whole of the Europe, the protectionistic restrictions are taking place. And if you see the more and more European country, you talk of Germany, you talk of France, you talk of UK, they are getting more protectionistic. But what is key about this particular timing of the budget is when in United States the new president Donald Trump has come, he has not minced his words in telling that America first and the India is a tariff king. The only word Donald Trump says he loves is the tariff. He says he has to protect his country by tariffs, bringing more jobs and, bringing more manufacturing. When India was using to talk, our Prime Minister used to talk Modi ji about Swadeshi. People said India is getting protectionistic. Now nobody is saying that America has got protectionistic. The entire framework of multilateral trading system in which the WTO came into the existence, the framework was one country, one tariff. The framework was basically reduction of tariffs. Tariffs have been reduced very substantially across the world over the last 30-40 years. Tariffs have been reduced even after WTO. But now, very recently, a few weeks back, the day I think that Donald Trump, took on the power, he said that he will have a universal 10 to 20% tariff. Now, who is affected most? The European countries,
The Americans will be affected the most.
They are affected the most. And the tariff is going the 25% on Mexico, 25% on Canada, because you have more trade deficit. He said with China we have got much more trade deficit, 65% on that. Anybody who favors China and de-dollarization, 100%. And therefore very recently in the name of BRICS, I think India's name was also taken, in imposing the higher tariffs. So I think under this circumstance, now one is, anyway, it is time which will tell us whether.
But do you think, Professor Joshi, that in the budget, India has already taken account of what Donald Trump has been threatening?
Absolutely. In this budget, it's a very holistic in nature. And what has been, I think between the lines, if you read it, it is probably the first time wherein among the key engagement, the exports has come. It is probably the first time when MSME has been come, agriculture has come, and investment has been come. It's very, very holistic, well thought of, and strategies rather than, having some, tariff concession or.
And India has overall lowered its tariff by about 10%, hasn't it?
And more importantly is, we have also under this budget, some attempt has been made to address the inverse duty structure, wherein, more duties were being charged on the raw material and less duties on the finished product, which was impacting manufacturing. Now you take example of fisheries, wherein which has been the input which is required for fishery cultivation, those inputs, the tariffs have been reduced. You see the inputs for the leather industry, the tariff is reduced. So it's a very, very holistic. More importantly is, we have talked about the export promotion mission. So I think I'm very sure that Department of Commerce is responsible for export promotion, but probably I think it's a very thought of, where it is thought that the two ministries, I'm sure that like all of us work in silos, ministries do work in silos, and therefore MSME, Ministry of Finance, Department of Commerce, each has got a role to play. They come together under this mission, and more importantly is what this budget is talking of, the trade net or the Bharat net kind of a thing we are in, the documentation, the information, the domestic. So we are leveraging on technology in export facilitation, and like you have got a DigiLocker or a DigiYatra kind of a system, the logistics kind. So we are going to integrate that, and I think it is going to be a great facilitation to the exporters, and the exporters and the entire country will realize the benefit of this, I think, sooner than we think.
Professor Chaturvedi, I have a twofold question for you. One, to borrow what from Professor Joshi mentioning, do you see a Trump imprint or effect on the budget per se, number one? Number two, from an RIS perspective, what do you make of the focus on making the bilateral investment treaties more investor friendly?
Absolutely brilliant questions. Let me take up the BIT first. For quite some time, several of our partner countries have been complaining about the model that we have adopted for BIT. So I think FM was there when she announced that it would be reviewed, and it would be thoroughly reviewed. We haven't moved forward an inch in terms of how the new BIT should look like. So I think mentioning that in the budget speech and giving a direction in terms of what we exactly need in terms of bilateral investment treaty, the road is now set, the targets are clear, and I think these guardrails that she suggested in the paragraphs, which are just one above and one below, they provide the direction for us to go forward on BIT. So we need to strengthen that. Globally, you are seeing a trend where, unlike earlier where you used to go for FTAs, the free trade agreements, and now you go for investment agreements with trade as just one small component. So investment is more heavier than trade now. So you find that direction going. The Trump footprint, as Professor Joshi rightly pointed out, is very much there, but it is a different kind of response, I would say. There are three things in which you can, even if you juxtapose Trump over budget, you can see three very clear distinctions. First and foremost, India has opened up. Whether you take up the FDI, whether you take up the tariff rationalization, Finance Minister hasn't gone for protectionism. Finance minister has gone for
No, 100%
an open,
FDI and insurance is a major step.
Is a big step, 74 to 100% in FDI in insurance sector. You also find tariff rationalization. And third is of course to promote BIT, which we were just discussing. So you find these deviations which are there, which do not bring in our response in any way to copy what is happening in the US.
And Professor Joshi, again in response to what has been happening with Donald Trump coming into the White House a second time, do you feel that apart from what has been done in the budget, it would be a time that would be right to strike when the iron is hot and push for at least, if not a full FTA with the US, but at least a limited one?
I think it's a very complex question that you are asking. Professor Chaturvedi was talking about the BIT. You see, India has been very innovative in signing in FTA, which we have signed, wherein we have, committed them to invest $100 billion in India in the next 5 years. So I think these kind of things are likely to come, and I am very sure, Gautamji, what you are saying is something of that wherein, investment commitment can be taken from US. But, US is interested in the things like agriculture product. If you see, the Washington apples are available, every, town and village of this country. 80-90% of the almond are imported
but most
in
people
India
can't
from,
afford them.
India. So we cannot open that. Dairy is a sector, dairy and agriculture are the sector in which America is pressing. America is pressing, certain sectors in which I think we are unwilling to open up. And this is what I think we made it very clear to the European Union. In case you force us for dairying, I think we cannot go for FTA. So those kind of that sensitivities is there, but I am very sure it is a time, because US is also feeling isolated in the whole world. India, it's a great time for India to capitalize the challenges in the global economy, wherein the relations between United States of America, its close partners which were part of the NAFTA earlier, which was changed later in the Donald Trump's period earlier, with Canada and Mexico, and if that and China is another big opportunity which India can have, opportunity both in investment, opportunity both in trade, opportunity in supplying or being a supplier of the ancillary products to China. And I think India also need to find out a strategy wherein, say, large scale manufacturing. I am very sure that in a few years this space will be vacated by China. Human intensive manufacturing in India, I think there is still a scope. Integrating the technology, which I think we are trying in various things, and I am very sure that time is right, that you should strike when the iron is ripe and hot. So I think it's a very appropriate time to keep it. And India is already working. I think if you know the functioning of the government is working, I think, very deeply analyzing each and every product, each commodity products market, that after coming Trump, what has to be our trade strategy. And I am very sure that with these inputs, very strong inputs, when the Prime Minister visits United States, some sort of understanding or agreement, I think we can initiate for that.
Right.
Okay.
Professor Chaturvedi, besides maritime and shipping, for instance, which you discussed earlier on in your intervention, another issue which of interest to many of the viewers watching this broadcast, especially to hear from you, would be science and technology and innovation. What did you make of the emphasis on setting up a center of excellence for AI in particular, or generally a consensus or a thrust to harness resources, public-private partnership, human capital, skilling, semiconductors, all coming to fruition so that India can take on the powers that be in this particular domain?
Absolutely right, and I think very relevant and very timely move now to connect AI with education. So the budgetary allocation that has been announced for setting up of AI center, specialized center of excellence, is in the realm of education sector. You also find mention of expanding the base of Atal Tinkering Lab to several schools. The idea is also in terms of how do we leverage science, technology and innovation for multiple sectors and multiple tasks that have been identified with specific ministries. One important point that you would see here, which is very interesting, is in terms of defining goals of various ministries and then their monitoring. As of now, you have been encouraging various ministries to leverage STI and go forward. Hasn't happened to that extent. So monitoring has also been mentioned in a very clear way. The idea of interministerial committees which have come up, like for instance, mention was made of Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Commerce and MSME coming together, all three coming together. This coming together is also important in terms of how the cost-effective technology is made available to them. You also find mention in terms of agriculture sector where science technology has been given a push and identified. So if you look at the front runners in technology, be that in form of accessing AI, but also if you look at the technologies which are needed at level of startups and small enterprises, provision has also been made. You also find that these sectors require far more hand-holding in terms of how you bring in what last budget announced in terms of providing a huge sum of money for R&D in the private sector.
And there was talk of funds for deep tech as well.
Exactly. So if you look at the operationalization of the last budget's mandate in terms of setting up of the R&D labs in the private sector, you find this time the road is coming in. The idea is also very clear in terms of what kind of private sector consortiums can be encouraged for participation. So this part I think is extremely important, that we are trying to see that the growth is based on innovation, growth is based on partnership, and adequate resources are made available from the government in terms of taking that forward. It is also very clear in terms of how semiconductor has also been provided support with the government's.
And let me again come back to Professor Joshi with the question of trade. Professor Joshi, you've talked about the Trump factor and how that might trigger a cascading or an effect, a domino effect on the issue of protectionism versus globalization, and that tariffs might go up all around. In that case, do you feel that the budget has created scope for where our exports need to be diversified further, our markets need to be, export markets need to be diversified further? Do you think that is something that has been accounted for in this budget?
Yes,
just to offset this tariff war that might be, at our doorstep.
No, very right, very right. One is that if you see that, we are analyzing what are our products which are going to America, we are also focusing on the services export. The budget basically talks of, creating creating for the global capacity building centers, global capacity centers in the tier 2 cities. So it is leveraging the services exports based on the, technology and that integration of the technology. This is one. And if you look into, even in the manufacturing export, when we talk of diversifying the export, we are focusing on, domestically manufacturing, export oriented manufacturing. And I think what has been, going to be the game changer is a special focus on MSMEs. Now these MSMEs especially, we are also diversifying, we have got a policy of, the Look East India policy, we are diversifying into the new market. And based on that, this thing has come. Now if you look into, the whatever has come is, the information system that BharatNet we are going to create is facilitate our export and help exporters, at the lowest level in the district center or wherever they are located to identify new markets, identify new product and facilitating them. So our dependence on, on one market or especially is reduced. But please try to understand that America, it will take time that our product become very incompetitive in the American market, because if America imposes 65% tariff or more tariff on China, if America imposes 25 tariff on that. So I think if I am very hypothetically, if America imposes 10% tariff on India, so our product comparatively to other is going to be more competitive. But more than that, it gives investment opportunity to India from other countries. So only thing is we need to be prepared, and this budget takes care of it. You know, in the infrastructure development, getting it prepared, and investment is a key area of focus in the entire budget today.
Professor Joshi, just a quick question talking about foreign trade and exports. So what did you make of the emphasis or accent on ease of doing business in India, and how do you see the attempt in the budget to reduce regulations for foreign investments as well?
Look at two things. One is states have been asked to do some competitiveness index also. So ultimately, you know, the government of India makes the policy, but I think these things are the actual exports are being made, you know, by the state, and the state has got a lot of role to play in agriculture, in land, in labor, all that. So those things have been given here, and so you know that will make our exports competitive in the international market. This is what I think.
All right, wonderful. Well, let's also tell our viewers about what other reforms are in the pipeline as far as the budget is concerned once the proposal passed. Well, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman underlined that this budget aims to